Thank you for watching the Housing Oregon YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe. Slide decks from the presenters are going to be available below. Thanks for watching.
Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us here today. My name is Robin Shuey. I'm the Director of Grants and Programs at the Cooney Foundation, and we are so grateful that of all the wonderful sessions that are during this block, you've chosen to join us for Design and Construction, How Building for Accessibility Sets Your Project Up for Success. And it's my honor to introduce our esteemed panel, and we have a speaker joining us via Zoom. So up here at the table, we have Brian Squillace from Bora Architecture. Peter Catterall is on Zoom from Parkview Services up in Seattle. Carrie Luse from Community Vision, and moderating our discussion today is Jennifer Knapp, also from Community Vision. So please join me in thanking them for speaking today.
I gotta stand up. Well, good morning. Anybody actually at the gala last night that's feeling a little sleepy? Oh, look at you, 9 a.m.ers. I'm very, very impressed. Well, welcome. Thank you for being here this morning for these great folks. So I'm here just to do a bit of an intro. Part of the thing that we're going to be talking about today is just the concept of universal design. The idea that when you design with everyone in mind, including folks with disabilities, turns out it really works for everyone. And so the idea, just a little bit of definitions here, universal design is usable by all people without a need for adaptation and specialized design. So the idea is make it work from the beginning, and then you don't have to go back later and do costly changes. And that it's beneficial for people to age in place, to navigate when learning English, for flexibility in use, in addition to folks with disabilities. So there's actually a really broad range of people for whom the built environment hasn't been great, that we're trying to have a different way of doing business. So here's an example, just to kind of start us off, of the benefits of universal design. So this building here is built by Sabin CDC, and they actually won one of the awards last night for this building. And so they just decided to make everything accessible in this building. And one of the people who really got to benefit from that was somebody that we work with, Jenny. Jenny had lived in a group home before because of her physical disabilities, and she was really, really wanting to be on her own and have more independence, but due to the lack of accessible design, she wasn't able to. And so this provided an opportunity. Another thing just for you all to know, for folks with disabilities, they often bring their services with them. So Jenny brought all of her personal care services with her. The building didn't need to do that, but just by being in a built environment that she was able to access, she now is connecting with her community and having a great time. So this is just a resource that actually these fine folks helped to make. So there's a universal design guidebook. Here's a QR code. You can get it on our website. If you would like it, we can also get it to you later. But so it's just cvision.org is where you can find it. And the idea is to kind of be a primer about universal design. There's a lot more in-depth options out there, but we wanted to have an accessible resource for people. And Brian will talk a little bit more about some of the concepts in this guidebook, but we just wanted to let you know that that resource is available. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Brian to talk much more about design.
Good morning, everyone. Is that working? That's working. All right. Within our practice, just to zoom out for 1 second, when we talk about universal design, it's part of a much broader conversation around equity. And when we think about equity, it really goes from the micro, from the components of the materials that we specify to put into a building and the impacts that those materials will have on the resident health and the environmental quality, all the way up to the global scale and the impact our buildings and the built environment will have on climate change, on the labor practices that go into making those materials that we specify. So it's a very broad conversation. And within that, universal design, I think typically is seen and discussed at kind of the human scale, that scale of the individual. How do you provide somebody the choice and the agency to honor their lived experience and really give them that equitable access and opportunity to the space that they're in? Through this presentation, I want to shift that a little bit more towards the community scale and suggest that the broader goal is actually creating that equitable opportunity so that folks can have a sense of belonging and feel a part of that social cohesion that will lead to community resilience and all of the kind of broader opportunities that come through that connectedness. Universal design itself is often understood to have 7 principal strategies. Those are along the bottom here. It's about creating that equitable space that is flexible enough and intuitive enough that people can access and use it, regardless of sensory capabilities, cognitive capabilities, the information, the wayfinding should all be highly perceptible to them. There should be enough tolerance within the design so that people don't have to operate it exactly the way that we thought they might, because we know that they won't. And so we need to have that tolerance built into the design, thinking about low physical effort to use the spaces, as well as enough flexibility in the size, the space, the shape for that mobility. The list of bullets here are some of the many, many strategies, toolkits, checklists that can be applied and thought of as a portion of universal design. And we tap into those in different times for different reasons with different communities. It's always a conversation not necessarily about which boxes should we be checking, but really what is universal design going to mean to this effort? And that usually starts with understanding the people that we're going to be working with, that we're going to be designing for, that we're going to be supporting throughout the built environment that we're creating, and inviting their participation, understanding the diversity within that community, and how do we engage with them in a way that's going to feel meaningful, that's going to help them to feel comfortable and safe coming to these conversations, and is going to, and what types of questions do we ask so that they feel like their impact will result in change in the end, or will result in a more equitable environment for them or the people that they're representing in those conversations. Once we find those communities and begin speaking with them, we typically have to spend some time educating each other. We spend some time unpacking a lot of the unsavory aspects of design. Most spaces, this building definitely included. Wait, can we stop for 1 second? Off script. How do people feel in this room? Does anybody want to answer that question? Or how did you feel in one of these rooms yesterday at like 4 p.m. when it was really hot and there was no fresh air? But there's no daylight. I have no idea what time it is outside. I had to come up steps to get on this stage, right? There are all sorts of things about this room and every space that you go into that impacts your perception of it and the level to which you're comfortable engaging with other people in that space. Most of the built environment that we have was designed by able-bodied white men. We all bring our biases to the conversation, and we get to unpack those when we engage with these communities and talk about things as large as redlining across our city and the impacts that that had generationally on race and opportunity. And it comes down to the small things like where we put steps versus stairs, right? It's a broad spectrum, and we get to spend time listening to people on what their experience is in that space, and then translating that and thinking deeply about that when we question our own biases and start stepping into design itself. Once we start that conversation, we can question a lot of what we've historically thought of as best practices. Some of that is the building code. Some of that is our aspirations to go beyond the building code. And as we look at these best practices in relation to the previous conversations we've had with these communities, we often question them, whether it's the materials that we're specifying and the adverse effects that some of those might have on the health of the occupants, whether it's the goals that we're selecting towards resilience and sustainability, being sure that we're really specifying and picking the goals that are going to have the greatest impact and benefit for those communities. Or at a bigger level, especially within housing, we spend a lot of time unpacking and questioning the American dream, this idea of independence and what that means, and instead reframing it and seeing the value in interdependence and how through that social cohesion and designing for communities, we can really support each other's independence. It's not that it's one without the other, it's that really both become much more critical to the conversation. From there, once you've opened those conversations, the importance is really on ongoing transparency. And how do you help people to not only feel like they're being heard, but really be heard in those conversations? We often work with the communities we're engaging with to prioritize their own goals, so that as we understand complexities, whether it's through jurisdictions and building codes or cost implications, we understand their priorities going into it. And as the design becomes iterative, we can then go back to them and reflect on what we've learned and be sure that those priorities are holding and what we heard we're reflecting accurately within the design. We've had the opportunity to unpack these conversations and think about universal design across a pretty broad spectrum of project types, building types. The top two here both being affordable housing. Community Vision was involved in conversations for both of those, which we're incredibly grateful for. But also public schools. The bottom right there is a workforce training center for Portland Community College. So depending on the community you're engaging with, the type of building you're designing or the type of environment you're designing, the list of strategies that we might use to best serve those communities can be quite different. In the next couple slides here, we're going to look at a case study. This is an affordable housing development on Portland Community College's Southeast campus that is just about to break ground. I cross my fingers because I think many of you know what financial closing looks like and what just about actually means. But hopefully by the end of the year. It's 124 units, 4 stories, 60-ish% of them are family-sized units. The development itself opens up onto the community college's campus, offering a lot of beautiful green space to the residents and also helping to kind of stitch together a conversation between about opportunity between housing and education and what that access can look like for folks that might not have seen themselves in a post-secondary environment. From the very beginning, we started engaging with the community on this project. We had multiple pre-design listening sessions, just taking a lot of notes, asking a lot of questions with both community members and service providers. I think we spoke with roughly 40 people in those sessions before pencil ever hit the paper, before we ever started designing anything, to understand what those priorities were. Throughout the design, we then met with Argis. Oh, I did not mention, Argis Future is the developer. It's on PCC's campus, but Argis Future will own and operate the building. Apana was also involved. LMC Construction will be building it. We met with Argis Future's resident advisory group throughout the process, as well as several different groupings of Portland Community College's students, staff, operations teams, to understand what they saw as opportunities and challenges to having affordable housing co-located on their campus. We had some neighborhood meetings, and then maybe most impactful to kind of the ongoing iterative aspects of the design were the service partners that we sat down with at each phase of design to share what we had learned and heard and how we incorporate into the design. And that was an iterative cycle. That was Trash for Peace, Community Vision, ICO participated in some of those, Rose CDC joined a couple of those conversations, as well as some other Argis Future residents throughout. And at the highest level, there was a lot of nuance to what we heard in all those conversations, but we heard a lot about the desire for choice, the opportunity to build community beyond the apartment, that we're designing a whole building, and residents should have the opportunity to use it and use the site and enjoy them and meet each other and not just go into their apartment and close the door. How do we design community spaces that don't have to be locked, that can be open for residents to use, and how that communicates to them a sense of pride and sense of belonging in that space. But we heard a lot about spaces for an individual to find reprieve, as well as for groups to gather, spaces to be active, spaces to be quiet, spaces for small wheels where kids could be kids, spaces where people who didn't want to hear kids being kids could also have a space that felt comfortable to them, right? So within all of this, within all these strategies, there's contradictions, and we spend time through conversation understanding how we find balance. Here's a site plan of the building. Division Street is actually over on the right side. Up above that top courtyard on the top of the screen is the rest of the community college's campus. And then down from the screen is residential neighborhood, residential street over there. The blue boxes are the suite of community amenities, and we heard a lot about the desire to have ready access to the site, visual access to the beautiful trees that are on the site and the courtyards that we were creating, the ability to quickly and easily get outside, so all the ground floor units have their own private entries so they can come and go. The community spaces spill out into that courtyard. There's a lot of interconnection between those spaces so that individuals can choose when they want to participate in a social event versus sit on the edge of it and do their own thing but still kind of be a part of the action on the side. There's a small classroom because we heard about a desire for the college to come to the building sometimes, residents that might not feel comfortable going to an event elsewhere on campus, at least at first. That could be a stepping stone for them. We heard about the desire to have protected outdoor areas, thinking about the nice climate that we have. And when you take the rain falling from the sky out of the equation, there's a lot more time that you can actually spend outside sitting in those spaces together. So a lot of interconnection between the community spaces, distributing them throughout the building so residents could have choice as to where they want to be and when, and then really connecting to those outdoor spaces. Wayfinding, to go back to some of those universal design strategies, and thinking about an ease of navigation throughout the building. We leaned into storytelling and placemaking as opportunities to guide the wayfinding at different floors and throughout the building to help people navigate, as well as distributing some areas so that people could rest along the route and chat with each other or just take a break. This is a large building, it's 124 units. So how do we simplify that scale and think about neighborhoods within the building by distributing some of those amenity spaces and creating those rest spaces? Along more traditional accessibility lines, our corridors are significantly wider than they would otherwise need to be. We have door operators on all of the spaces that residents will regularly be using and accessing. We have 2 elevators, one at each end of the I shape of the plan, so that if somebody is in an accessible unit on one side of the building, they don't have to go all the way down the corridor, up and all the way back, but just to ease that circulation for them. So quite a few strategies thinking specifically about accessibility beyond code. Looking inside some of the spaces, this is one of the community's rooms right here. We had a lot of conversation about visual connectivity, specifically for folks that have low vision or the deaf population, and how having that sense of openness can really support them understanding what's happening from one space to the next as you move into it. But then also having enough contrast within the materials, the texture, the color, to easily navigate a space if you do have low vision. And then balancing that with a trauma-informed approach where you don't want a lot of contrast, right? So again, there's contradictions in these conversations, and each time we get to really dig a little bit deeper to understand how we can find a balance between these desires. One of the last things on this slide I'd like to mention, something that Community Vision has just taught us should be best practice on every project we do, is including wheelchair charging stations at different points in the building, in the community rooms especially here. Plug-in devices that aren't that expensive, but alleviate somebody having to leave a community event to go up to their unit to charge their power chair, or worse yet, get stranded somewhere because they run out of power. So there are a lot of these little things that aren't high cost, but until you have a conversation and learn about the importance and the value of it, you wouldn't think to incorporate it, or at least I hadn't. Universal design also becomes a great lens to view resilience and sustainability. Within a lot of the extreme weather events that we've been having, smoke events, we'll look in a second at a slide from the heat dome, ice storms, whatever it might be, power outages, our marginalized communities are more greatly impacted by these events. And so having strategies to help people shelter in place and stay in community through these events and have their support networks is incredibly valuable. So we relied on a mix of active systems as well as passive strategies, understanding that sometimes these events happen concurrent with power outages. If you get a heat dome and a power outage, what does that actually do to the interior of a unit? So we do have centralized heating and cooling, heat pump water heaters, solar panels, energy recovery to all bring those utility bills down and support occupant comfort. And then in the case of the power outages, passive systems, we have exterior insulation on the building, enhanced air sealing, operable windows, of course, solar shades on the outside of the building at key locations where they're really going to make an impact to the interior temperature. So again, thinking strategically about where we're spending our money to optimize the impact with it, as well as maintaining the existing tree canopy that's around the site. There are a lot of beautiful trees. We did apply for a couple of land use adjustments, which in some ways we're kicking ourselves for right now as we move towards closing and some of the realities and challenges of the politics of affordable housing. However, the benefit of those adjustments was to keep those existing trees. And so even sometimes the best of intentions can mean that you're having some hardship later. And so I would certainly do it again on this project, but keeping those trees is not always as welcome as you might think amongst some people, or at least the challenges it opens up for them, or the opportunities to challenge things. We also leaned into backup systems. Solar panels linked directly to the battery backup so that in a power outage you could charge critical medical devices as well as power chairs, refrigerate medications, and keep at least the community spaces comfortable. This chart, the blue line is actually showing the heat dome that we experienced in 2021. The green line is showing the typical interior temperature that would result through the course of that heat wave had there been a power outage. We actually didn't lose power in the last heat dome, but it's probably only a matter of time until we have those events occurring together. And what you can see here is that green line peaks at about 105 degrees inside of a unit in that same weather event with a power outage. So through the strategies that we're using in this building, the green line here you can see drops out of that extreme danger zone, that red zone on top, and down to an 84 degree maximum in those units if somebody opens their windows to let the cool air in at night. Probably less than it was yesterday here. Absolutely. Beyond that, accessibility measures, clearly there's a need to go above and beyond to increase the number of accessible units that we have and the way that those are functioning. We were able to put together, and Jesse, who actually created this table, is in the audience right now, so I feel like I just want to give you a nod. We created a matrix of the accessible features that we were interested in and heard about as being beneficial to go above and beyond code minimums. We were able to work with LMC to assign values to each of those features early on, and then prioritize them together with our advisory group to understand which of those measures we wanted to incorporate from the very beginning into the bid and into the project, which of them were just going to be too far out of reach, which there's only 2 or 3 on here that were, and then several in blue there that you can see are potential add backs that could be purchased during construction as we better understand contingencies and any challenges that come up during construction. So again, setting those priorities early, understanding the costs associated with them, and just being as transparent as possible at each stage. To wrap it all up, as a designer, this is an incredibly exciting space to be in. The biases we bring to projects only allow us to design things that are as wonderful as we can imagine. But when we include more voices and we understand people's lived experiences, we have the opportunity to envision things together and to really imagine things together. And there's no shortage of inspiring projects that are being done by architects here in Portland, as well as more broadly, to really think about how we can better be serving a broader spectrum of people more equitably. That's it for me.
So next we're moving to Zoom. Our next presenter is on Zoom, so pardon our change.
Oh, wow, that was great. Thanks, Brian. You're a hard act to follow. Good morning. I'm Peter Catterall. I'm a project manager with Parkview Services. So before I get started, I'd like to just thank Robin and the Cooney Foundation for inviting me to do this. Thanks to Jennifer for doing sort of the MC thing here, and to Brian and Carrie for all your support and collaboration. Probably no surprise to anyone who's done one of these things before. We did a little pre-planning in advance, and yeah, so I knew that this was going to be a tough follow. I'm sorry I'm not able to be there with you all, but sounds like you're all having a great time. Gala was a lot of fun, and most of you apparently survived it, so that's a good thing. I've been able to zoom in to some of the workshops. Obviously, a lot of really wonderful and information being shared around, and so that's really great. So I'd like to take just a moment to talk about Parkview, what we do, because I think it helps to sort of establish the lens, the frame from which my take on affordable housing and accessibility universal design comes from. So Parkview is a mid-sized nonprofit up here in Linwood, Washington. Been around since the late 60s. Our primary thing is affordable rental housing for folks with developmental disabilities. it was, like a lot of nonprofits, started by just a couple of folks, and has grown over the last 50 plus years to point now that we have around 70 properties across King, Snohomish, and Pierce counties. Um, uh, Approximately 200 or so tenants, all with IDDs, and all who are extremely low income. So Parkview operates in the 30% or under AMI space. So a challenge at, at best. We rent, we call a unit a bedroom, because our model is shared housing in community, scattered site shared housing. Average rents for most of our tenants are about 300 a month. Parkview does not, however, provide any supported living services. And I know I want to clarify something. When I talk about supported living services, I'm talking about day-to-day in-home assistance from a nurse or a CNA, that allows our tenants to live, full, complete, happy, safe lives. And sometimes, that's just someone stopping in, and sometimes that is 24/7 awake overnights. Depends on the population, the clients in that home, but we don't provide those services. Our tenants contract with third-party providers who provide those. As I just said, we operate a scattered site in community housing model, and in order to make that work, most of our properties are single-family residential, or we've got maybe 20% condos out of that 70 total. And I suppose the last thing you should be aware of is that, with very few exceptions, our development funding comes from public schools. So Washington State Department of Commerce Housing Trust, county and local funding, typically federal CDBG and home pass-through type funds. And then occasionally, thankfully, we receive funding from some private charitable foundations like CUNY. So because of that funding model, we have lots of, strings and overlays and red tape and so forth that we have to deal with. And because there will sadly probably never be enough funding for the need, there's also, I think there's no surprise, a little competition between nonprofit houses. And I want to tell a story about how that competition can sometimes be a good thing, and how it can spur collaboration that can yield really great. So I guess that's a long way of saying I'm not a big box builder. I don't do multifamily. That's not where my expertise and my place in life is. I work with scattered site residential properties. We've done 7 or 8 over the last few years. Mix of new construction and acquisition rehab type projects. And so I'd like to talk first maybe about one of our new construction. This is a project in a subdivision called the Southard, down in Tukwila, just south of Seattle. I'll go to the next slide, I think. All right, that's will work. So I don't know if you can see this, but the Southern and Tukwila in the upper left-hand corner. This is a side-by-side new development. Single story, single family, 4-bedroom, 2-bath. This was a collaboration between Parkview and Homestead Community Land Trust. And if you know anything about the land trust model, it's growing rapidly, and Homestead is probably, if not, it is the largest land trust in the Seattle area. And as such, all of us developers, we tend to bump into each other from time to time at, events like this. And, often the conversation rolls around, we should really find a way to work together someday. Well, Homestead and Parkview did. A couple of years back, they had the opportunity to purchase some land from a church, a very community active church. But it needed to be used for affordable housing. And that's mostly what Homestead does. But as is often the case, making affordable housing pencil, making affordable housing affordable can be challenging. So we found a way to work together where Parkview would build 2 properties out of the 13 in the development. And we would be able to bring some funding to the table as a result of this that could be used for to fill other holes in the construction and project budget. And because of who we specifically serve, we had access to some funding sources that Homestead might not have otherwise had. So because there was such a long lead up to this, we were able to get in early with our architect and design a property that was going to work for our tenant community. We were able to bring in the supported services provider who would be operating these properties. We were also able to bring in Homestead's team, their contractor, builder, some engineers, and some other folks. I think by the time we actually went to permit, we had around 12 people in the project team, all collaborating on design and some of the other features that we were going to incorporate into these 2 properties. No, these aren't big properties. They said they're 4-bedroom, but they're only about 1,500 square feet apiece, and so needed to fit a lot of stuff into it. The other thing that is often the case, and anyone who's ever had roommates probably can appreciate this, finding 4 people who can live together can be a challenge. And so it's important to think about these kinds of things and to do what can be done to not only provide a space that is community, but also can provide, a sense of privacy as well. And so we did this by building bedrooms on opposite sides of the property, installing the bathrooms and laundry room down a center line, and then having the 2 resulting hallways open to a great room kitchen space where people could gather for dining and community. We incorporated the things that you would expect in a, uh, accessible, designed accessible. One of the bathrooms is got a roll-in shower, the other's a tub shower, both wheelchair friendly. The laundry and mechanical space is also wheelchair friendly, and wide hallways. We don't do closet doors. We like to just stick with curtain tracks and curtains. More easily operated and dealt with by all sorts of folks. We dropped, of course, the kitchen workspaces, roll under sink, level entry access, all of those. And we did this, you know, with our tenant population in mind. But what we found is that it also is a really great way um, to assist the supported services staff who are also in the home. Um, Folks of shorter stature, or folks who are maybe disabled in some way themselves, um, are now not only able to really function and support our tenants very well in this place, but also it um, becomes a place of community for them as well. Um, and some of the last things that we did, um, because again, we had a nice long planning phase to this, is that we thought about, okay, how are we going to make this property really set up for the future? Um, and so we thought about a lot of the IT stuff that I think Carrie will be talking about very shortly, and what kind of infrastructure we would want to include. I mean, we had the walls open. This is new construction, never going to be easier, never going to be cheaper. So high-speed data cabling, every bedroom, and multiple places in the great living space. All connected to a structured panel with fiber optic data. We installed appliances that were all Wi-Fi enabled. So washers, dryers, ranges. We've got video doorbells. That was sort of a coincidence because they ended up getting installed as part of the security system during the construction phase, and then just got left. But they're a great addition. And if you can see the photo, I'm sorry, I should have I apologize for my presentation here, but both homes are stacked up with photovoltaic solar, and that system can also be monitored and followed if you're of and want to see how much energy your house is producing on any particular. The last thing we did was, before we closed up the walls, we ran a whole lot more flexible conduit between that structured panel and various locations in the home. And if there are any builders out there, I think you know what Smurf tube is. That blue flexible plastic conduit. Real easy to install, super inexpensive. At that stage in the game. But what it does is it provides a conduit that, as we move into the future, we can expand that type of all of the IT and adaptive technology, options that may be coming down the road. So great, right? I mean, I just described a property that is, largely like every other new constructionally, intentionally kind of designed accessible home. The rest of it, I guess, is that this one is also ultra high energy efficient. A net zero home, both of them. They're Energy Star rated, and because of the PV and because of the materials used in their construction and so forth, we were able to qualify for enough. We're called the Evergreen Standard Development. Enough points to qualify as built. So that's my first. My next one is about a project that we recently completed. It was a first for us, sort of a pilot test. We were Parkview was approached a few years ago by a supported services provider who had a client who, because of some behavioral issues in addition to IDD, was unsuccessful in shared community housing. So it wasn't a person who was going to be able to live with other people. Really needed a one-off, one-bedroom sort of a situation. And then, so the provider called to say, hey, do you have such a thing? Do you have a one-bedroom? Do you have, maybe a mother-in-law, something like that? Well, we did some phoning around and learned from some other providers, service providers that we work with that, yeah, no, there's really, we didn't have anything. None of the other housers had anything. We also found out in the process that lots of service providers have a tenant or two or three or client who needs the same. It is an enormously under represented portion of the community, and too frequently individuals in this with those sorts of challenges end up living with their parents or their families because there's just really no place for them to be, even in the established housing sort of framework that we have created. So another part of this is that from the standpoint of a supported services provider, it's really not financially viable for them to operate a one-off property. Typically, it takes 3 or more clients before they can, make everything pencil. When you can find single families or single bedrooms, they're typically in condos or apartments. Someone with behaviors that, maybe, disruptive to others isn't going to be successful in that environment. And that was sort of the case. So, as I said, Parkview has about 70 properties scattered across counties, and we have a bunch of properties in Seattle. And back in 2019, Seattle changed some of the regulations it had for detached accessory dwelling units. Typically, they remove what's called the owner occupancy covenant. And so that opened the gates for a lot of builders to start doing some things, including Park. And so we identified a property that we already had in the neighborhood that that would work for this individual. And we went about purchasing what was a pre-approved plan. This is pre-approved by the Seattle Department of Construction and Inspections. Turns out that was maybe not the best idea, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. Along the way, we did run into a few stones in the path. Turns out that you need to have enough road frontage in order to get a second driveway. This particular property we chose backed to a dead end cul-de-sac, and our plan was to have a driveway from the dadu to the cul-de-sac, so it would have its own address, its own entrance, so forth. And we were eventually able to convince the city that this was in everyone's interest. It took a little while. One of the biggest probably hurdles we had to overcome, and something that we should have been able to move past early on, was that when we started getting into the actual construction, we found out that some of the utilities that we were anticipating tapping into weren't exactly where they had been marked to be. And I'll talk a little bit about that lesson learned at the end as well. But that did set us back in terms of schedule. And it had an impact on budget. We were able to overcome that. So we built a 600 square foot dadu, and it's got all of the same things that you would expect to find in any sort of accessible structure, purpose-built home, roll-in shower, and roll under vanities, and all of the raised outlets and the lowered switches and the lowered countertops. We installed an induction range and accessible washer and dryers, mini splits, and a variety of
Hey,
things
Peter.
that could be
Peter, I'm
connected.
sorry to interrupt, but we need to, if you could just wrap it up in the next couple minutes, that would be great so we can get to the next presenter.
Sure, thank you.
Thanks.
So in short, yes, we installed all these really cool features, and the client tenant has moved in, and it's working very well. But we learned along the line. So this isn't necessarily a list from these two situations, these two developments, but I'll just quickly go through it. Get some clarity from the jurisdictions that you're getting or doing permitting with, because sometimes that changes, and it will have an impact. Don't ever trust utility maps, ever. Think about scheduling a pre-con, if you can, 60 to 90 days in advance. Get your contractors and their subs and all of the subject matter experts in the same room and on the same page as early as possible. If you're building or remodeling, like multiples, reusing, or try to standardize as much as you can. Try to do just one materials approval round during that phase. It really cuts down on costs. Perform some owner, architect, contractor sort of constructability reviews as early as possible. It'll really help to lower risks and increase efficiency. And when you turn over properties, as we do to, the operating staffs, be sure that you meet with members across their operational hierarchy, everyone from their leads down to their staff, because inevitably there are going to be places where things don't get communicated as maybe as well as they should, and that can and usually does cause some issues down the road. And I guess the last thing I'll say is think about the future when you're designing and building, so that you can be ready for when it arrives. Anyway, that's all I have. Thank you for letting me take a few minutes of your time. And I'm gonna now send it over to Carrie, because I know that really she's the one you probably all come to hear anyway. So thanks again.
Thanks, Peter. Such great information. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Robin. So we'll jump into assistive technology and see how that can help people be more independent and have more autonomy in their homes. So I'm Carrie Luse. I'm the director of the Assistive Technology Lab at Community Vision. Here's some more information. We're in Southeast Portland. We actually have open hours Thursday afternoons. You can stop by, visit us. We're an education resource center open to the public. We offer free advice. You can call us about things. We have consultations. We do trainings. We have funding support. So we do lots of things. So check us out and come visit us if you're in the Portland area. So what is assistive technology? Who can take a guess what that is? Maybe you've heard of it. Maybe you have a guess what that is. Somebody say something. Yes, there we go. We're going to be talking about smart home if you all use Alexa in your home, or Siri, or Google Home. Yeah, speech devices. So for someone that doesn't have the full use of speech, there are speech generating devices that can help someone speak. Absolutely, Bluetooth and Wi-Fi assisted appliances. So we're going to see some of these examples. And the definition of AT, there's a fancy definition from the federal government, but we like to say it's just things that help people with disabilities participate in life. It could be a pencil grip. It could be a wheelchair. It's anything that helps someone with a disability participate in life. And it also includes smart home technology. So we'll talk about that for a little bit. So the examples we're going to see today kind of cover these three areas. We're going to look at examples of AT that helps with independence, physical access, and safety. So some examples of tools and technology that help with independence in the home for time and planning. So the first thing is obviously think about your space and creating intuitive spaces that help us with our time and planning. But in addition to that, there are apps that help with your task management, so task apps. So many tools around time and planning. As you mentioned, communication tools. So for someone that doesn't have the full use of speech, it could be a device. It could also be a communication book. It could be a button you press that says a message out loud. Computer access. So how many folks use dictation or voice to text? Fair amount of folks. I live and die by it now. My typing is not as good as it used to be because I use my voice all the time. Adaptive keyboards, adaptive mice, and as you mentioned, Alexa, smart speakers, smart screens. So we have the Echo Show up here. So with someone with intellectual and developmental disability, they could use their Alexa Show and say, hey Alexa, pull up a spaghetti recipe, and it'll walk them through how to make spaghetti. So there's some really fun tools that benefit everyone, particularly with somebody who has some extra needs. So who uses a smart speaker at home? Who would like to give an example of what you use your speaker for? Music, yep, turn it on music. Do you use Spotify, or what music do you use? Alexa? Yep, you just tell it to play something. Yep, iHeartRadio, whatever it's connected to, it plays. Making lists, right? Yeah, you can tell Alexa to add it to your list, add it to your shopping list, make a reminder. It's super handy. Okay, so some ideas for physical access. First of all, always think about accessible seating in whatever space you're designing. Avoid bar height if you can. Have lower seating options if you're able to.
Install wall shampoo, soap dispensers in the shower, but please note, make it near and accessible from a seated position. So there are many hotels that have these wonderful tools, but they're really far away and you can't reach them from a seated position. So keep that in mind. In common areas, have automatic soap dispensers. Anyone use smart bulbs at home? Yep, more common, more folks are using smart bulbs. It can be connected to the Wi-Fi through a device such as a phone or a tablet, or it can be remote controlled. So you don't have to use the device if you don't want. You can order them online at the store. They're remote control ones that have a little remote. And then smart shades. Does anyone have a smart shade in their home? They're pretty cool. So in the lab, we have 2 different brands of smart shades, and you just ask Alexa or ask Siri to open the shade, and it is pretty cool. You do need to charge them, though. So some examples of safety, AT tools for around safety in the home. There are sensor alerts that can be installed around the home. You can get as fancy as you want. So a sensor that someone is leaving the home, someone's coming in. So the caregiver could wear a portable device, and when the sensor goes off, they're alerted that a call bell has gone off, someone is leaving, someone is going, all kinds of sensors. So on the flip side, if you don't want something built into your space, there's also a wearable that you can put on and use a tracking app. So kind of 2 different ways to go around tracking and safety. As Peter mentioned, video doorbells. Anyone have a video doorbell? Yep, more common now. It can be hardwired or it can be battery operated and installed after the fact. Induction ranges are becoming much more popular for safety. So if you touch the stove, you won't burn yourself. You can have a full range put in, or you can have a countertop range, which is only a couple $100. So that's another nice option. So I live and breathe AT and tools, but big secret is not about the tool. We get all excited about our shiny, beautiful new tool. Check out this red new screwdriver. It's so beautiful. But guess what? Is this the right tool for the job? What kind of planning went into picking this tool? Was there a feature matching process that went on? Likely this is not the right tool for this job. I'm just going to take a guess. You don't take a nail out with a screwdriver. Does it look like this person even likes this tool? So if someone doesn't like the tool that they've been given, are they going to use it? No, it becomes a beautiful paperweight, and we've seen lots of beautiful paperweights out there. So it's the whole process around selecting the tool. Where is it going to be used? Who is going to support it? What are the strategies that are being used around the tool? So these are the things that are the most important. And the tool's great, and we love tools. Often there's multiple tools you could use to get the job done. But it's this whole process around the tool that folks don't always realize, and that's what makes the tool successful, not the tool itself. Okay, some fun facts about assistive technology. It dates back to the 1800s and even further beyond. So glasses are an example of assistive technology, cane, crutch, really anything, again, that helps someone participate in life. The term was first defined in 1988 in what is now called the Federal Tech Act. So we have a federal mandate that enables folks with disabilities to access technology. And every state has an AT center. Ours is down in Salem, and I'll give you that information. Some AT lasts a really long time. So if it has no movable parts, just a slant board, that's going to last a long time. If you start adding some movable parts to it, shelf life not as long, and then if you add any digital Wi-Fi component, as we know, that's not going to last super long. So keep that in mind. AT is very often person-specific, but there are some tools that you can and strategies that you can use that benefit many folks. So let's see some examples. So where to start your build? Here are some ideas we put together that can benefit many folks. On the left-hand side, we have ideas that do cost money, and then on the right side, we have some free ideas. So if you're building units, consider having free guest Wi-Fi for everyone. Access to the internet is a huge barrier for so many folks, marginalized folks, and particularly folks on limited income and folks who have disabilities. So if you make that Wi-Fi accessible from day one, that is really going to make life a lot easier. If you can't do that, at least provide packets on internet access resources, and we're happy to share those if you need those. Consider putting extra outlets in units beyond the every 6 feet. Really, we have found that folks that have disabilities use a lot of outlets and a lot of charging is needed. Another idea, offer one free smart plug or a smart bulb to each resident that would like one when they move in. They're not that expensive. You know, if they don't want it, no problem. But you're just offering up some technology resources, but you're also normalizing technology for folks. So the more people that kind of use these smart home tools, it normalizes the technology. AT used to be kind of the special thing for the special person, and it was clunky stuff. But since the advent of iOS, it's really changed the field of technology for folks with disabilities, and it's become normalized and more accepted and more readily available. Another idea, raffle off a video doorbell. Again, normalizing that technology in the community. Another cost item is high-low options. So in our building at Community Vision, we have high-low desks, we have a sink in our kitchen, we have a high-low cabinet in our kitchen if you'd like to come see it. If you don't have that option, can't afford that, again, consider avoiding bar height counters and then accessible furniture in common areas. Last idea, if you've got some money to spend on your project and really want to make your project more inclusive, consider paying for staff on training on disability and assistive technology. Whoever's going to be working, let's say, in the apartment complex, wherever it is, train your staff on disability etiquette, and what technology is and what can help folks. And then if you can, provide inclusive resident services. And if you can't do those things, at least connect with a disability service provider, such as Community Vision, or we can give you a list of other folks to provide resources, again, on disability etiquette, AT, and things that can help folks with disabilities. So any questions about this chart or any thoughts on our ideas? Yeah. A movable, thank you, yeah, we'll clarify. So for high-low options, we mean movable up and down. So our desks in our building all are electronic, high-low, or you can buy mechanical ones at IKEA where you just squeeze it and it goes up and down. Our cabinet that comes down in the kitchen is on a hydraulic, very expensive, but they also is a mechanical option. And then our sink is on a hydraulic as well. Pretty cool if you'd like to come see it. Any other questions on these ideas? Okay. So as I mentioned, every state has a Tech Act Center. Ours is in Salem. It's called Access Technologies, Inc., and that is funded by the federal government. Again, for us up here in Portland, you can come visit the AT lab. We're part of Community Vision. We started the lab sort of in response to the fact that our AT center is in Salem and Oregon is a huge state. We used to have satellites around the state from the tech center, and those have kind of, I think the funding probably has dried up over time and we don't have those satellites. So there's no place here in Portland to really get your hands on AT and learn about it. So that's why we started the lab when we opened the building in 2018. So here's our contact information. And that is it. I'm going to hand it off to you, Jen, and see if folks have questions about anything.
Well, I believe we have about 10 minutes if people do have any questions or comments, thoughts, ideas. And Robin, I think we're just going to have people shout it out, and then I will repeat the question, and we'll get it to the right person. So go for it.
Yeah.
Repeating the question.
Yes, absolutely. We were asked about looking at specific certifications for universal design, including the Kelsey Foundation, the WELL certification. What's that? Rick Hansen. I'm actually not familiar with that one, so let's chat afterwards because I'd like to learn about it. Yes, so I personally have used the WELL certification. We have not yet used the Kelsey, but have been looking at it and would love the opportunity to. Again, it kind of comes down to what's right for the people that you're serving. And sometimes those certifications are a perfect fit, and sometimes they become an onerous checklist. And I'm not trying to speak ill of any of them. I think they're all worth investigation, and there are other options out there as well. But it's really kind of vetting it thoroughly enough before you commit to understand that it's going to support you in putting your intentions and your money into the right areas. But I'd love to hear your opinion on it as an actual universal design consultant. That's great. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. All right. Other questions? Oh, sorry. The Rick Hansen Foundation is making inroads in the U.S. It's a Canadian certification system. And so hopefully we'll be learning more about it and seeing more of it. All right.
So I will repeat the gist of that question for the people on Zoom, and then I'll let Brian answer. So the question was basically, are there examples or ways to map universal design to building codes, recognizing that complication?
Building codes are a minimum. I think we all know that. They do what they can to legislate for safety and welfare, and have historically and continue to leave a lot of people out of the equation in those conversations. And I think that the two of you should also talk, because I think that the best way to codify is to come up with the checklist, right? or to leverage another version or set multiple standards that are acceptable and require somebody or a development to lean into some combination of those, right? OHCS does that when it comes to its green building standards. It's a multiple pathway option. And so something like that, akin to that, I think could be leveraged. Anytime you codify things, you create a yes-no system that gets at the heart of why universal design is important from a more philosophical level, right? The intention is to serve everybody. We have to listen to them. We have to design for them. That's really easy to say when you have people that are at the table that are very excited to do this. That's hard to execute when budget realities come into play, or people who aren't excited about this or have other priorities are at the table. And so it's a fine balance, I think, between codifying things and really listening. Yeah, I would agree. There are certainly lessons learned that streamline the process as you go from one project to the next. I don't mean to say that every design needs to be completely bespoke, but I do think that we need to continually be questioning what those best practices are so that we're continually improving them, expanding them. So there certainly are ways to streamline, and there are lessons learned, but I think that the questioning is an important part of the process. Yeah, thank you. Any others?
I think we've got time for one more. Go for it. Yeah, so the question was about how do you get community input around design?
That's a really good question, and there's never, again, like it's not one size fits all, right? So it depends on, in affordable housing in particular, you can't solidify residence until you have certificate of occupancy and start taking applications. And so the best you can do is design alongside of and speak with residents in other similar communities or prospective residents that might apply, or service providers that can speak to what their communities are seeing. In other building types, you do have the opportunity to speak directly with the users, right? And to really meet with them one-on-one and understand specifically what their needs are going to be. And then for each of those groups, sometimes it's easier to meet in person versus virtually. Sometimes it's more comfortable for them to have one-on-one conversations versus being in groups of folks that are representing other perspectives. Sometimes multiple perspectives are a great thing for opening up the conversation. And so again, for us, it typically comes down to, there's a whole planning process to do the engagement, right? We need multiple conversations with different people at the table to understand what do we think is going to be best received and get us kind of the most impactful feedback. And then even with that, we often make adjustments as we go, as we see that somebody doesn't feel comfortable and we have a side conversation with them after a session, or we didn't get the turnout that we thought we were going to get, and we have to kind of dig into why that was. And so, again, I think it's just a lot of communication and best of intentions, and then being willing to make adjustments and understand and acknowledge when you're not the best person to have a conversation or to shepherd the conversation. Maybe somebody else needs to come in to facilitate, or when you make a misstep, you own that and you just be really transparent and communicative.
Well, that's our time. Thank you all so much for being here at the 9 a.m. session on day 2, and have a great rest of your day.